Alright, I'm going to go over problems 43 to 50, and on these we get to solve or find the root, or find the zeros using whatever method we find easiest. And so on some of these you may use a different method than I am. That's okay. Just check to make sure we're getting the right answer. If not, then you're going to want to take another look at your problem. Okay, so number 43 says find the roots. To find a root, you set y equal to 0 and solve for, usually it's x, but in this case it's z. And I tend to try factoring first. Not always, but I'm going to check factoring out here first. So I'm looking for two terms that multiply to 21z squared and add to 10z. I'm thinking of factors of 21. 3 times 7 is 21, and 3 plus 7 is 10. So I'm going to go with 3 and 7. Split this up. Factor by grouping. Factor out the z plus 3. Set each factor equal to 0. And we get two answers. Z is negative 3 and z is negative 7. Alright, number 44. This one, probably what's most natural for me to do is to solve by taking square roots. You could factor this one, but it's a little easier to do it the other way. So I'll let f of x be 0 and take add 121 to both sides. I'll switch it around and then take the square root. Just remember, if you're doing it this way, don't forget to put the plus or the minus, otherwise you'll get it wrong. So it's positive or negative 11. 45. We're going to pick a method to solve here, and I'm going to try factoring. If factoring doesn't work, then I'll do the quadratic formula. I'm probably going to avoid the completing the square just because I'm noticing b is an odd number, and when you complete the square you want to do b over 2 squared, and you'd end up with a fraction. Not a bad thing, but I think it's easier to do the other two methods in this case. So if you're going to factor, or if you're going to use the quadratic formula, the first thing that has to happen is you need the equation equal to 0. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides of the equation to make that happen. Try factoring out, looking for two terms that multiply to x squared and add to negative 3x. It's not going to happen, so I'm going now to the quadratic formula. So a is 1, b is negative 3, c is 1, and from memory, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. And then go ahead and reduce that. So we have 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 minus 4 over 2. Keep going. 3 plus or minus the square root of 5 over 2. And there's nothing more we can do to that. Those are our two answers. 3 plus square root of 5 over 2 and 3 minus square root of 5 over 2. On 46, factoring is going to be the easiest method here. set it equal to 0 by subtracting 5t from both sides of the equation. Factor out the GCF, which is t, and then set each factor equal to 0. And you get t equals 0 and t equals 5. On 47, I'm going to set this equal to 0 and try to factor. I'm not sure if it will work. So I add 3 to both sides of the equation. I'm looking for two terms that multiply to 6x squared and add to 10x. So I'm thinking about my factors of 6. So 6 and 1, not going to make 10. 3 and 2, not going to make 10. So this thing is not going to factor. So now I'm left with a quadratic formula or completing the square. Completing the square, in this case we're going to end up dealing with fractions, so I'm just going to jump to quadratic formula again. So a is 2, b is 10, c is 3, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is 3, all over 2 times a. Simplifying that, we get negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 100 minus 24, because 4 times 2 is 8, 8 times 3 is 24, all over 4. Keep going, negative 10 plus or minus the square root 100 minus 24 is 76 over 4. Now I'm going to try to simplify the square root of 76. 76 is 2 times 38. 38 is 2 times 19. And so this can be changed to negative 10 plus or minus 2 square root of 19, because I got two 2's, all over 4. And then we reduce our fraction to negative 5 plus or minus 1 square root of 19 over 2. Okay, number 48. 48, I'm going to set this equal to 0 first by adding 1 to both sides of the equation. I'm going to check it if it factors and quickly see that it doesn't. I'm going to use quadratic formula again. So a is 1, b is negative 11, c is 1. So x is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a. So we get 11 plus or minus the square root of 121 minus 4 all over 2, which is 11 plus or minus the square root of 117 over 2. I think that's all we can do. I'm just going to double check. So 117, I know it's divisible by 3 because 7 plus 1 is 9. So 3 goes into 117 how many times? Looks like 39 times. Oops, and so actually this does simplify a little further. So we can get 13 times 3 times 3. So that's going to simplify to 3 root 13. So let's go further. 11 plus or minus 3 square root of 13 over 2. So that's where we want to finish. Okay. Next one, 49. find the roots. And so we set this equal to 0. Got t squared plus 6t minus 11. I'm going to use, well, again, you can check factoring. It's not going to work. In this case, since b is even, it's not going to be too hard to use completing the square, and so that's what I'm going to do this time. And so I follow what we did. I put parentheses around the t squared and the t, factor out a 1, which is a in this case. Leave a little room. Keep the negative 11 out here. And then take b, which is 6, over 2 squared, which is 9. So I add and subtract 9 inside the parentheses. Take the 1 times the negative 9 to get rid of that fourth term inside the parentheses. And then factor, I'll use the shortcut. It's going to be t plus b over 2 squared. And then negative 9 and negative 11 is negative 20. And now solve by adding 20 to both sides of the equation. And then take the square root of both sides. And I'm going to flip it around so I get t plus 3 on the left side when I take the square root. And plus or minus square root of 20. And then subtract 3. And 20 is 4 times 5. Right, so you get the square root of 20. 2 times 2 times 5. And so we're going to get 2 root 5. So t is equal to negative 3 plus or minus 2 root 5. And that's solving by using the method of completing the square. And our last one, we're going to find the zeros. So plug in 0 for y. F of x is the same thing as y. And because there's no linear term, no term with x, I'm just going to solve by taking the square root. So I will subtract 144 from both. Actually, I'll just subtract 4x squared. So I'll get negative 4x squared is 144. Divide by negative 4. And I'll get, see how many times does 4 go into 144? Or does it? Let's check. If I have 144 over 4, I can cut them both in half and get 72 over 2. Cut them both in half again and get 36. So this is going to end up being negative 36. Take the square root. Don't forget the plus or minus. This is imaginary, so we're going to get plus or minus 6i. And there you have it. Hope things are going well, and see you on the next video.